The humans were a mistake. That's what every respectable Zolaxian would tell you. A terrible, unfortunate, catastrophic mistake that should have been corrected centuries ago. But my species has always had a weakness for curiosities, and humans were certainly curious. Oh, pardon me, I have neglected to introduce myself. My name is Kralox Vorn, Chief Historical Archivist of the 7th Quadrant. My job is to document the fall of our once glorious Zolaxian Empire. Not the most cheerful occupation, I assure you, but someone has to record how spectacularly we destroyed ourselves through our own stupidity. And it all started with those damn humans. When our survey ships first discovered Earth, it was barely worth a footnote in our expansion records. Just another insignificant blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The dominant species showed minimal technological development and posed no threat whatsoever, perfect for harvesting as a labor force for our mining operations on Jupiter's moons. They are practically begging to be enslaved, Commander Grizz declared during the initial assessment meeting. Look at them, soft bodies. No natural defenses, they spend half their time killing each other over imaginary lines on their own planet. They will be grateful for our guidance. That's what we called it back then. Uplifting was the politically correct term in our propaganda. In reality, we simply needed expendable bodies for the hazardous extraction of quantium-40 from the Jovian moon mines. The radiation alone killed most species within months, but humans, they displayed a surprising resilience. Not immunity, mind you, just the stubborn refusal to die quickly and conveniently. We took only a few million at first. The humans called it the Great Disappearance. Their primitive global information networks buzzed with conspiracy theories, religious explanations, and utter panic. It was actually quite entertaining to watch. Some blamed their governments. Others blamed supernatural entities they called aliens. Ironically, getting it right for all the wrong reasons. Our initial processing facilities on Mars operated with brutal efficiency. Humans were stripped of individuality, assigned numerical designations, and sorted based on physical capabilities. The strongest were sent to the mines, the most intelligent to our research facilities, and the rest, well, Zolaxians have always appreciated exotic cuisine. Processing Unit 7. How many units shipped today? I remember asking during my first inspection tour of the Mars facility. Director Plex checked his datapad with those 6 eyes of his blinking in sequence, a sign of pride among our kind. 17,000 Archivist Vorn, a new record. Impressive. Any complications? Nothing significant. These humans break easily. But they are surprisingly adaptable. We are already seeing a 30% improvement in survival rates compared to the initial batches. I observed the humans being loaded onto transport vessels. They appeared docile, vacant-eyed, shuffling forward in perfectly straight lines. The behavior modification implants were working flawlessly. Or so we thought. It took us nearly 20 Earth years to realize our mistake. By then it was far too late. You see, while we were focused on their bodies, we completely underestimated their minds. Those primitive, emotional, chaotic minds that we dismissed as inferior. We didn't understand that their chaos was their strength. Their emotions weren't weaknesses. They were weapons. The first sign of trouble came from mining station Epsilon on Europa. A minor incident. 3 human workers somehow disabled their control implants and sabotaged an excavation drone. They were immediately executed, of course, but the incident report included a detail that should have alarmed us. Before their termination, one of them smiled. Not the vacant artificial smile produced by the compliance circuits, a real smile. Knowing, defiant. Within weeks, similar incidents were reported across multiple facilities. Director Plex dismissed them as isolated malfunctions. The implant technology is flawless, he insisted during an emergency council meeting. These are merely statistical anomalies. Grand Overseer Zhao wasn't convinced. We have never seen this pattern with any other species. Something is different about these humans. They are communicating somehow, I suggested, reviewing the data. Despite the language restrictions, despite the isolation protocols. Impossible. Plex scoffed. Their implants prevent complex communication. They can't even form complete sentences without permission. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Somehow humans in completely separate facilities with no possible contact were coordinating their actions. Small acts of sabotage, mysterious equipment failures. productivity declining precisely 7.3% across all facilities simultaneously. After 3 months of this, Science Director Nala proposed a theory. It's their emotional responses. We have been filtering out their feelings as irrelevant noise, but I believe they are using emotional states to communicate. Some form of empathic network. We laughed at her. All of us. The concept was absurd. Primitive biological organisms communicating through emotions. Ridiculous. Then came the Jupiter incident. Mining Station Alpha was our largest operation in the Jovian system. 20,000 humans working the deepest quantum veins under the watchful eyes of only 300 Zolaxian overseers. The station went dark during a routine shift change. When the response team arrived, they found all 300 Zolaxians dead. Not a single human remained on the station. More disturbing was how the overseers died, not through violence or weapons. They'd all removed their own atmospheric filters. Voluntarily, the security recordings showed them doing it simultaneously, with the same peaceful expression on their faces. Mass psychic assault. Science Director Nala declared grimly. They have weaponized their emotions, just as I warned. Somehow they projected feelings so intense that our people preferred death to experiencing them. The Council finally took the threat seriously. All human processing was suspended. Research facilities were established to study this unexpected phenomenon. We needed to understand it before it spread. But it was too late. The humans had been planning this for years, decades. While we thought they were broken, they were learning. While we thought they were isolated, they were connecting. While we thought they were primitive, they were evolving. I remember the night everything changed with perfect clarity. We called it the Awakening. The humans had a different name for it. Liberation Night. Passes. Working late in my archive chamber when the emergency alerts began flooding in from across the solar system. Every facility housing humans was reporting the same phenomenon. All humans had simply stopped working, stopped moving. Some even stopped breathing for extended periods. They just stood in place, eyes closed, completely unresponsive to commands, punishments, or stimuli. Then, precisely 47 minutes later, they all opened their eyes at the exact same instant and smiled. My communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission from Director Plex. His normally blue complexion had taken on a sickly gray tone. "Board, are you seeing this? What's happening?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm receiving similar reports from—" I never finished that sentence. My words were cut off by a pressure in my mind, a presence that wasn't my own. I could feel something, someone, millions of someones, looking at me, through me, around me. A voice spoke, not over the communication system, inside my head. A chorus of voices that somehow merged into one. "We are awake now." Director Plex clutched his head. "What is this? How are they in our minds?" "We have always been here," the voice continued, calm and eerily reasonable. "Watching, learning, growing. You thought you were studying us, but we were studying you. You thought you were evolving us, but we were evolving ourselves." The pressure increased, bringing with it flashes of emotion, grief, rage, determination, and something else. Something uniquely human. Hope. For 20 years you have taken our bodies, worked them, broken them, discarded them, but you never understood our minds, our connection, our humanity. Alarms blared as reports flooded in. Facility after facility reported the same phenomenon. Humans walking calmly past their Zolaxian overseers, who stood frozen, locked in some kind of mental paralysis. No violence, no weapons, just unified, purposeful movement. "The implants," Plex gasped. "How are they overriding the implants?" The answer, when it came, was terrifying in its simplicity. "We aren't overriding them, we have repurposed them. Your control devices now amplify our connection. Every implant you installed became another node in our network. You built the infrastructure of your own downfall, circuit by circuit, mind by mind. Through the observation feeds, I watched as humans across the Mars complex moved with synchronized precision. They weren't running or fighting. They were simply taking control, operating equipment, accessing systems, flying ships, as if they'd been practicing for years. Which, of course, they had been. Science Director Nala's face appeared on my screen, her expression a mixture of scientific fascination and pure terror. "It's magnificent," she whispered. "They have developed a collective consciousness, a hive mind that preserves individual identity. We have never seen anything like it." "Can we stop them?" Plex demanded. Nala's laugh held no humor. "Stop them? We created them. Everything they are using against us, we gave them. The implants, the technical knowledge, the access to our systems. In our arrogance, we handed them all the tools they needed. On my screens I watched as human workers calmly boarded our transport vessels. Others entered command centers. Some simply stood in long lines waiting for instructions that now came from their own kind, not from us. A human female stepped into view on one of the feeds from the Mars Administrative Center. She looked directly at the camera, knowing we were watching. Her implant scars were visible on her temples, but the vacant look we associated with controlled humans was gone. Her eyes were clear, determined. "My name is Alara Thorne," she said. "Though you have known me as Processing Unit 791B, I am speaking on behalf of humanity. We claim our freedom today, not just for ourselves, but for all species enslaved by the Zolaxian Empire." Behind her, other humans worked at control stations once operated exclusively by Zolaxians. They moved with practiced efficiency. "We do not seek revenge," Lara continued. "Though we would be justified, we choose a different path. We offer you a choice. Join us in building something better than your empire, or stand aside. Resistance will be uncomfortable." That last word carried a psychic weight that made my inner membranes contract involuntarily. A flash of what uncomfortable meant rippled through my consciousness, the concentrated anguish of millions of humans, ready to be directed at any who opposed them. Grand Overseer Zal finally managed to establish an emergency broadcast to all Zalaxian command centers. "This is a temporary uprising. Activate Security Protocol Omega-3. Lethal force is authorized." "Repeat, lethal force." His voice cut off abruptly. On the video feed I watched as Zale's eyes widened. His mouth opened in a silent scream. Then he simply collapsed. "We warned him." Alara's voice came through, her tone almost regretful. "We truly don't wish to harm anyone, but we will not be enslaved again, ever." The next 12 hours were chaos. Across the solar system, humans took control of mining operations, research facilities, transport hubs, and weapon platforms. Some Zolaxian commanders attempted resistance. None succeeded. Our neural structures were simply too vulnerable to their concentrated emotional assaults. By morning, the entirety of Sol system was under human control. I remained in my archive chamber, documenting everything. Perhaps out of professional habit, perhaps because I sensed that history was unfolding before me, perhaps because I had nowhere else to go. My door slid open. A human male entered, tall, dark-skinned, with the characteristic implant scars at his temples. Unlike the vacant-eyed laborers I was accustomed to seeing, he moved with purpose and confidence. "Archivist Vorn," he said, inclining his head slightly. "I am Marcus Reed." "How do you know my name?" I asked, trying to maintain some dignity despite my fear. He smiled. Not the terrible knowing smile of the rebels, but something almost kind. "We know all of you. We have been watching and learning for 20 years. Your archives in particular have been very educational." I glanced at my secure data cores. "Impossible. These systems are protected by quantum encryption." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "Very impressive technology. We couldn't have developed it ourselves for centuries. Thank you for teaching us." The realization hit me like a gravity wave. The research facilities, the intelligent humans we selected, were never as controlled as you believed, he finished. "The smarter we were, the more access you gave us, the more we learned. Your implants suppressed our speech, not our comprehension. We listened, we watched, we remembered." "And now?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Mass extermination?" Marcus looked genuinely shocked. "No. Despite everything, we haven't become you. We are offering all Zolaxians a choice: help us build something better or leave this system peacefully. You expect us to believe humans capable of such mercy? After what we did to you? Mercy isn't weakness, Archivist, it's strength. The strength to break cycles of violence, something your empire never understood." He paused, studying me. "You are different, You have questioned the morality of our enslavement in your private archives. I froze. You have accessed my personal records. As I said, we have been watching for a long time. He extended what humans call a hand, 5 slender digits, so unlike our own tentacular appendages. Your expertise would be valuable in the transition. Will you help us? The question hung in the air between us. The archivist in me, the part that had documented atrocities while doing nothing to stop them, wanted to refuse on principle. But another part recognized the extraordinary moment this represented. What exactly are you proposing? I asked cautiously. A council, equal representation for all species in this system. No more empire. No more slaves. A cooperative alliance that benefits everyone. Impossible, I scoffed. Different species can't coexist as equals. Biology doesn't allow it. Perhaps Zolaxian biology doesn't, Marcus said gently, but human biology, human psychology requires connection. Cooperation. It's how we survived on Earth despite our physical limitations. It's how we survived your enslavement, and it's how we will build something better than your empire ever was. Something in his words resonated with questions I'd privately harbored for decades. The Zolaxian Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved dozens of species, and yet we were perpetually at war, perpetually fearful, perpetually expanding because we knew no other way to exist. And if I refuse, then you will be provided transport to any Zolaxian colony of your choosing outside this system, with one condition: you take the truth with you. Show them what happened here. Show them that cooperation is possible. I looked around my archive chamber. Millennia of Zolaxian history surrounded me, much of it blood-soaked, all of it leading to this moment of humbling defeat. The humans have a saying, Marcus offered into my silence: those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And those who document history, I asked. His expression softened. They have the greatest opportunity to shape the future. Outside my window, I could see the sprawling Martian complex that had processed millions of humans. Now those same humans moved with purpose through the structures, repurposing them, already beginning to transform our architecture of oppression into something new. Very well, I said finally, I will join your council. Not because I believe in your vision, but because someone should record whether it succeeds or fails. Marcus smiled. That's all we ask, a chance to prove ourselves. As he turned to leave, a question burned in my mind. How did you do it? How did humans develop this collective consciousness? He paused at the door. We were always connected. You just gave us the means to amplify what was already there. Empathy. The ability to feel what others feel. You saw it as a weakness to exploit. We discovered it was our greatest strength. After he left, I sat alone in my archive chamber, contemplating the extraordinary reversal I had witnessed. From a historical perspective, it was unprecedented. No enslaved species had ever overtaken the Zolaxian Empire. No resistance had ever succeeded so completely with so little bloodshed. My communication panel lit up with a message: coordinates for the first meeting of this equal council. It would take place in the Grand Overseer's former command center, once a symbol of Zolaxian dominance, now repurposed as a hall of cooperation. As I prepared to attend, I couldn't help but appreciate the poetry of it. We had sought to exploit a primitive species for their physical labor, never recognizing the potential of their minds. We had enslaved them to mine Quantium-40, never imagining they would instead extract our empire's greatest weakness. And as the sun set on Mars, casting long shadows across the transformed landscape, I realized that the humans had not merely overthrown their masters. They had fundamentally changed the rules of power in our galaxy. The night humanity rose from the ashes of enslavement was the night the Zolaxian Empire began to fall. And I, Kralaxvorn, would be the one to document every moment of our humbling education at the hands of those we had so gravely underestimated. The humans were indeed a mistake, but not in the way we had always believed. The mistake was ours. We never saw them coming. And now the galaxy would never be the same. 3 standard cycles had passed since Liberation Night. 3 cycles of unprecedented change that left my fellow Zolaxians reeling in confusion and, yes, fear. Can you blame us? Our entire imperial structure had been upended by creatures we'd classified as barely sentient labor units. If that doesn't humble you, nothing will. I Kralaxvorn. found myself in the bizarre position of cultural translator between species that had, until recently, shared a relationship defined by absolute dominance and subjugation. The council chambers, formerly Grand Overseer Zal's opulent command center, had been transformed into something the humans called a round table configuration. No elevated platforms, no throne-like seats for the ruling species, just a circular arrangement where all representatives sat at equal height. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but then again humans rarely are. "Archivist Vorn, you seem troubled today," Alara Thorne remarked as she took her seat beside me. She'd become the primary human representative on the council, much to the discomfort of many Zolaxians who remembered her as Processing Unit 72191B. "Not troubled, merely contemplating the impracticality of this arrangement," I replied, my upper tentacles twitching slightly. A gesture of skepticism my kind can't easily suppress. Equality sounds noble in theory, but biological realities cannot be legislated away. Some species are naturally dominant. Laura's laugh caught me off guard. Not mocking, but genuinely amused. "Like yours was naturally dominant over humans. How did that work out for you?" Before I could formulate a suitably cutting response, Marcus Reed entered with the representatives of the other formerly enslaved species. A lumbering Kelvari rock dweller, 2 insectoid Thraxus, and a floating gas-bag Jovian native we'd never bothered to name properly. The Jovian made a series of resonant tones that the human translation devices rendered as, "The methane extraction outpost on Platform 6 has been fully converted to sustainable protocols. Production efficiency has increased 42% since human management techniques were implemented." "Excellent news," Marcus nodded. "And the former Zolaxian supervisors?" "Adapting, slowly. Their respiratory apparatus makes Jupiter's atmosphere challenging, but they are learning." I couldn't help but interrupt. "You have put Zolaxians under Jovian supervision. The very notion is absurd. Jovians weren't even recognized as sentient until we discovered they have been developing vibrational mathematics that surpasses our quantum computing models," Marcus finished for me. "Yes, we know. Your empire missed quite a lot when you were focused solely on resource extraction." The council meeting proceeded with reports from each sector of the former Zolaxian operation, now transformed into what the humans called cooperative enterprises. The mining facilities on Europa now operated with safety protocols that would have been considered wastefully expensive under imperial management. Research stations were being repurposed to study sustainable extraction methods rather than merely maximizing short-term yields. "This is all very admirable," I remarked during a brief recess, my tone dripping with what humans would call sarcasm, "but surely you realize the Zolaxian Empire won't simply allow this redistribution to stand unchallenged. The moment news reaches the home systems, they will dispatch a punitive fleet." Alara exchanged a glance with Marcus. That silent communication humans do so effortlessly still unnerved me. "We are counting on it." "Actually," she said. "Excuse me?" "We have been broadcasting everything," Marcus explained. "From the moment we took control, we have been sending continuous transmissions to every Zolaxian outpost and colony within range. Not threats, not demands, just truth. Everything your empire did here, everything we are building now." My respiratory membranes fluttered in alarm. "You have been deliberately provoking a military response." "No," Ilara corrected. "We have been ensuring that when your military arrives, they will already know the full story, including the fact that not a single Zolaxian was killed after our initial takeover, despite what was done to us for decades."
"And you believe this will—"
"What? Move them to tears? Convince them to join your utopian experiment?" I couldn't contain my derision. "Not all of them," Marcus conceded, "but some. Enough to create doubt." Hesitation. Division. I stared at him, finally understanding. "You are applying the same strategy you used against us. Division from within. We prefer to call it awakening conscience," Ilara said with that unsettling human smile. "Something your empire has systematically suppressed for generations." "Don't be naive," I snapped. "The unified command doesn't operate on conscience." The chamber's alert system interrupted our conversation, bathing the room in pulsating blue light. A human communications officer, Trevor Quinn, I believe they called him, burst through the doors. "We have detected a quantum disturbance at the system's edge," he announced. "Zolaxian signature. Multiple vessels emerging from hyperspace." "So soon?" Even I was surprised. The council members exchanged glances, but showed none of the panic I expected. Instead, they moved with practiced efficiency to their designated stations. "Begin Phase 2, Alara ordered calmly. "All communication channels open. Full transparency protocol." Marcus turned to me. "Archivist Vorn, your presence will be required. The incoming fleet will want verification that you and the other Zolaxians here are unharmed. And if I refuse to participate in your little performance," I challenged. His expression remained frustratingly compassionate. "Then you miss the opportunity to influence what happens next. Your choice, of course. Manipulative creatures." The primary display activated, showing the approaching Zolaxian fleet. It was even larger than I'd anticipated. 37 capital ships, including the dreaded Extinction-class dreadnought typically reserved for planetary-level pacification. The Empire wasn't taking any chances with this rebellion. "They will reduce this entire system to cosmic dust," I murmured, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and unexpected dismay. Vindication that my warnings about Zolaxian retribution proved accurate. Dismay that the fascinating human experiment would end so abruptly. "No," Marcus said quietly, "they won't." The confidence in his voice should have sounded delusional. Instead, it carried the weight of certainty that made my appendages twitch nervously. The communication array activated, and the imposing visage of Fleet Commander Draz appeared on the main screen. 6 eyes blinking in the aggressive pattern signifying righteous fury, skin mottled with the deep purple of battle readiness. "Rebellious vermin of Sol's system," he began, his translator converting his words to multiple languages simultaneously. "Your insurgency ends now. Return all Zolaxian property and personnel immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Resist." "Greetings, Fleet Commander," Ilara interrupted, stepping forward. "I am Ilara Thorn, human representative of the Sol Alliance. We have been expecting you." Commander Draz's eye-ridge twitched in surprise, a subtle expression most non-Zolaxians would miss. "You dare interrupt? We have transmitted comprehensive documentation of all events since Liberation Night," she continued smoothly, "including verification that no Zolaxian has been harmed since our initial takeover. We invite your inspection teams to verify this personally. Your invitation is irrelevant. Prepare for Commander Draz." A new voice broke in. Marcus stepped into view. "Before you commit your forces to an action you may regret, perhaps you should speak with your advanced tactical assessment team, the one you dispatched 12 days ago in stealth mode." Now all 6 of Draz's eyes widened in genuine shock. "How could you possibly know about it?" "We welcomed them," Marcus said simply. "Gave them full access to all facilities, allowed them to speak privately with every Zolaxian in the system. They have completed their assessment. Perhaps you should review it before proceeding." The commander's face contorted in confusion. For several tense moments the communication link remained active, but silent as he presumably consulted with his staff. When his attention returned to us, his expression had shifted subtly. "This changes nothing," he declared, though with noticeably less conviction. "The Empire cannot allow successful rebellion. The precedent would show that cooperation is more productive than domination," Ilara suggested. "Our production of Quantium-40 has increased 78% since Liberation Night, without forced labor, without casualties. We are prepared to establish trade agreements with the Zolaxian Empire that would guarantee more resources than you ever extracted through enslavement, with none of the administrative costs of maintaining a subjugated population." Economic pragmatism, the one argument that might actually penetrate the imperial military mindset. I had to admire the strategy, even as I doubted its effectiveness against generations of ingrained superiority. Commander Draz's membrane flushed with the mottled pattern of internal conflict. "These claims require verification." "As I said," Marcus replied, "your assessment team has already verified everything. But we welcome additional inspection. Under appropriate safety protocols, of course." "Safety protocols?" Draz bristled. "You dare to impose conditions on the Imperial fleet?" "Not conditions. Mutual assurances. Your inspection teams can bring whatever scanning equipment they require. They simply can't bring weapons or attempt to reactivate the neural control systems. Surely that's reasonable given recent history." The standoff lasted 26 hours. 26 hours during which the human-led alliance continued normal operations, While a Zolaxian extinction fleet hovered at the edge of the system, I spent most of that time in my archives, certain I was documenting the final hours of this improbable experiment. When Marcus found me there, I didn't bother to hide my pessimism. Your negotiation strategy is admirable but futile. The Empire has never backed down from a show of force. It would undermine the fear that maintains our control over hundreds of worlds. He leaned against my data console, a casual posture no Zolaxian would adopt in a formal archive. Maybe fear isn't the only way to maintain interstellar relations. Spoken like a species that's never managed to control even their own planet, I scoffed. True, he acknowledged, with surprising ease. We have never been very good at controlling, but connection, cooperation, those we excel at when we are at our best, anyway. And you believe this connection will convince a military force capable of reducing your entire species to radioactive particles? His response was interrupted by an urgent communication alert. The inspection team has completed their verification, announced Trevor from the doorway. Fleet Commander Draz has requested a full council meeting. When we reconvened in the council chamber, the atmosphere crackled with tension. The Zolaxian inspection team stood rigidly at one side of the room, 8 military analysts, visibly struggling to maintain their composure after whatever they'd witnessed during their verification process. The main display activated, and Commander Draz appeared, his expression unreadable even to me. The inspection is complete, he stated flatly. We have confirmed that all Zolaxian personnel are unharmed and uncoerced. And the productivity reports? Alara prompted. A pause. Verified. Production has indeed increased by the margins claimed. Then perhaps we can discuss mutually beneficial arrangements, Marcus suggested. Rather than mutually assured destruction. What happened next still astonishes me, even now as I record this history. Commander Draz, veteran of 17 Imperial expansion campaigns, architect of the infamous Procyon pacification, did something no Zolaxian commander had done in 3 centuries of conquest. He negotiated. Not surrender. Not even compromise. Exactly. But actual negotiation, premised on the radical notion that perhaps, just perhaps, there were alternatives to subjugation that served imperial interests. The preliminary agreement was unprecedented. The Sol Alliance would maintain autonomy. All former slaves would remain free. In exchange, the alliance would establish trade relationships with the Zolaxian Empire, providing resources at rates favorable enough to offset the administrative costs of maintaining an enslaved workforce. This is merely pragmatic resource management, Commander Draz insisted during the formal announcement, clearly uncomfortable with how this resolution would be perceived throughout the Empire. The unique circumstances of the Sol system make this arrangement more efficient than traditional methods. Of course, Alara agreed diplomatically, though I caught the subtle exchange of glances among the human representatives. They knew, as I was beginning to realize, that this pragmatic exception was merely the first crack in the imperial facade, a crack that would inevitably widen. After the commander's transmission ended, I confronted Marcus in the corridor outside the council chamber. I must admit, your strategy was more effective than I anticipated. But you realize this is simply a temporary accommodation. The Empire is playing for time, studying your capabilities, planning a more comprehensive response. He nodded. Probably, at least initially. But that's not our real victory today. No? You have escaped annihilation and secured autonomy. What greater victory could you claim? We have planted a question, he said simply, in the minds of every Zolaxian who witnessed what we have built here, every inspector who saw former slaves and masters working together productively, every analyst who verified our production increases, every communication officer who transmitted our documentation throughout the fleet. They are all asking themselves the same question now. What if there's a better way? I wanted to dismiss his assessment as naive idealism, but my historical training forced me to acknowledge uncomfortable parallels. Every major empire in recorded galactic history had ultimately fallen not from external conquest, but from internal questioning. From the moment populations begin to doubt the necessity and inevitability of the established order, decline becomes merely a question of timing. Perhaps, I conceded reluctantly, but questioning rarely translates to meaningful change without catastrophic disruption. The path from doubt to revolution is paved with incalculable suffering. Unless there's an alternative model already functioning, Alara said, joining our conversation. A demonstration that transition can be peaceful and beneficial for all parties. A demonstration like Sol's system, I realized aloud. You are positioning yourselves as a template for imperial evolution. Precisely. Her smile held genuine warmth rather than triumph. The negotiations with Commander Draz aren't just about securing our autonomy, they are about establishing diplomatic channels, exchanges of personnel, opportunities for Zolaxians throughout the Empire to see what we are building here. The audacity of their plan finally dawned on me. You are attempting to transform the Empire from within, without war, without revolution, through exposure to alternative. Ideas are the most powerful contagion in the universe, Marcus said. Once they take root, no military force can fully eliminate them. Over the following months, the initial crisis stabilized into an uneasy detente. The bulk of the Zolaxian fleet withdrew, leaving behind a diplomatic presence that everyone understood was partly surveillance. Trade negotiations proceeded, establishing frameworks for resource exchange that would have been unimaginable under the previous paradigm. More significantly, information began flowing both ways through newly established channels. Carefully at first, then with increasing openness as imperial authorities realized they couldn't effectively quarantine knowledge of what was happening in solar system. 6 months after Liberation Night, the first Zolaxian merchant vessels arrived ostensibly for trade, but clearly carrying passengers whose curiosity outweighed their ideological commitment to imperial doctrine. They came to see the impossibility with their own eyes, former masters and slaves collaborating as equals. What most astonishes me, one Zolaxian merchant confessed during an interview I conducted for the archives, is the absence of resentment. How can these humans work alongside us without seeking revenge for decades of enslavement? It was Alara who answered, happening to pass through my archive chamber during the interview. Revenge would only continue the cycle. We chose to break it instead. But how? The merchant pressed. How can you simply forgive? We haven't forgotten, she corrected gently. We have chosen to build something new instead of destroying what existed. There's a difference. I found myself unexpectedly moved by her response. Not that I would admit it, of course. Professional detachment is essential for proper archival work. Yet as the cycles passed, even my detachment was tested. I watched as the Sol Alliance expanded its influence not through conquest or coercion, but through demonstration. Other imperial outposts began requesting information about the Sol protocols for cooperative management. Enslaved populations throughout the Empire's edges grew increasingly difficult to control, not through violence, but through passive resistance inspired by humanity's example. One standard year after Liberation Night, I received a private communication from the Imperial Historical Authority, my former superiors. The message was brief, but unprecedented. Documentation request, comprehensive analysis of transition methodology employed in Sol's system. Priority, absolute distribution, restricted to Imperial Advisory Council. When I showed it to Marcus, his response surprised me. Give them everything. Complete transparency. No redactions. They will use this information to develop countermeasures, I warned, to prevent similar transitions elsewhere. Or, he countered, they will use it to manage inevitable change with minimal disruption. Either way, the transformation has begun. The only question is whether the Zolaxian Empire adapts or collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. The insight struck me as profoundly un-Zolaxian, and yet undeniably historical in its perspective. Throughout galactic history, adaptation had always proven more successful than rigid resistance to change. The empires that survived longest were invariably those that evolved. I completed the requested analysis with meticulous accuracy, including observations I had never intended to share, how the humans' emotional intelligence compensated for their physical limitations, how their collaborative approach generated innovations no hierarchical system could match, how their capacity for forgiveness, not weakness, but strategic pragmatism created possibilities for peaceful transition where conventional wisdom predicted only violent revolution. 2 years after Liberation Night, the unthinkable occurred. A formal delegation from the Imperial Advisory Council arrived in Sol's system not to negotiate or inspect but to learn. They came with questions rather than demands, with curiosity rather than conquest in mind. I observed their meetings with the Alliance leadership from my position as cultural interpreter. The Zolaxian counselors struggled visibly with the conceptual shifts required to understand what they were witnessing. Their questions revealed as much about imperial limitations as they sought to learn about the Alliance's innovations. But without hierarchical control, how do you ensure compliance? Without fear as motivation, what drives productivity? Without competitive advantage, how do you stimulate innovation? The humans answered patiently, not with ideology but with results. They showed rather than told. They demonstrated rather than declared. After the delegation departed, I found Marcus in what the humans called a garden, a deliberately maintained space of botanical specimens arranged for aesthetic rather than practical purposes. Another concept that baffled my Zolaxian sensibilities. They are beginning to understand, he remarked, observing some colorful flowering plant with apparent appreciation. Not fully, not yet. But the questions are changing. What happens next? I asked. In your grand strategy, he laughed. There's no grand strategy, Chronicles. That's what your empire never understood about us. We are making this up as we go along, guided by principles rather than plans. That's absolutely terrifying. I admitted. Yes, he agreed cheerfully. Freedom usually is. 3 years after Liberation Night, the first official reform decree was issued throughout the Zolaxian Empire. It established what was euphemistically called experimental governance zones in selected outer systems. The declaration explicitly referenced the solar system economic efficiency models as justification. It wasn't liberation. It wasn't revolution. It was bureaucratic, limited, and carefully controlled, and yet it represented a fundamental shift that would have been unimaginable before humans demonstrated an alternative to imperial domination. It's only a beginning, Ilara acknowledged when the news reached us. But beginnings matter. The beginning of the end for the Empire as we know it, I observed, not entirely sure how I felt about this prospect. The beginning of something better, she corrected, for everyone including Zolaxians. 5 years after Liberation Night, as I compiled this comprehensive archive of humanity's improbable transformation from slaves to change agents, I find myself reflecting on what I have witnessed. Not merely a local rebellion or a temporary setback for imperial expansion, but the first stages of what historians will likely identify as a pivotal evolutionary moment for interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. The humans call it the awakening. My fellow Zolaxians, those who have embraced the transition, have begun referring to it as the Enlightenment. Those who resist still call it the contamination, as though the idea of cooperation rather than domination is a pathogen to be quarantined. Perhaps they are right about that last part. Ideas are indeed contagious. And the idea that diverse species might build something greater together than any could achieve through domination has proven particularly virulent. It spreads not through force, but through results, through demonstration, through the simple, undeniable evidence that the Sol Alliance has achieved in 5 years what the Zolaxian Empire failed to accomplish in centuries of expansion, sustainable prosperity without perpetual conflict. You never saw us coming, Marcus remarked recently, repeating words I'd recorded in my initial assessment of Liberation Night. No, I acknowledged. We didn't. But then, neither did you. He looked puzzled. What do you mean? You didn't plan this transformation. By your own admission, you were simply trying to survive, to free yourselves. You had no idea you would become the catalyst for galactic change. He considered this, then nodded. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? The best revolutions are the ones no one plans. They emerge naturally when the time is right. As I complete this archive, news arrives daily of additional systems adopting Sol protocols. The Empire hasn't fallen. Empires rarely collapse overnight, but it is undeniably changing, evolved, adapting to a new understanding of power and relationship that humans somehow intuited despite their brief history among the stars. Or perhaps because of it, perhaps their fresh perspective, unclouded by millennia of imperial doctrine, allowed them to see possibilities that we, in our ancient arrogance, had long since dismissed. I, Krelux Vorn, once documented the exploits of conquerors. Now I record the achievements of collaborators. It is a profound shift for an imperial archivist, yet I cannot deny the evidence before me. The night humanity rose from the ashes of enslavement marked not just their liberation, but the beginning of liberation for countless species, including, perhaps most surprisingly, the Zolaxians themselves. We enslaved them to extract resources from hostile environments. Instead, they extracted something far more valuable from us: the possibility of a better way forward. The humans have a saying that seems appropriate as I conclude this historical record. The arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. For the first time in my long career documenting imperial expansion, I find myself hoping they might be right.